Okay, so we're here together for a little while to talk about karma and emptiness and how they relate to each other as tools to help us loosen the grip of ego, and get some bliss in life, give up the miseries. So just to start, we'll sing this little prayer that sort of, as the Buddhists would say, the Tibetans would say, we set our motivation. I think we might say, state our purpose. Why are we here together? Okay, what's the point, What's the purpose? Well, the purpose is we're going to listen, aren't we, to these words, including me. Even though I speak, I'm listening to every word, I promise, I'm processing. We're going to listen to this stuff, and what it is Buddhist teachings about how things exist, about how things are. And we have to hear it in terms of it being a piece of advice. Like if this were cooking class and I just sat here raving on about how nice cakes are, but you couldn't hear one recipe, you'd be very disappointed. So it's to listen to this advice, to hear these words, and we'll talk about this, and to try and hear how you apply it. What's the action here? What's the action? This is the only point of it. If there's no action to come from these words, then please keep your mouth shut. There's no benefit just going blah, It's a really important point. So we're going to listen to these teachings, is the idea, to see if there's some tools we can take to use in our life. First, to help us develop what for the Buddha is our unbelievable potential for clarity and kindness and less neurotic and less angry and less fearful and less jealous and so on. For our sake, and then of course because we live in this crazy universe together, for the sake of others as well, because we all interdependently exist here. And so the bigger framework today, of course, is this business of, it's just looking at these tools in order to help out develop our marvellous potential so we can help others. This is the idea, thinking like this. This is the purpose. So the prayer, the first two lines are for those of us in the room who already identify with being Buddhist, reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha. And the second two lines are stating this idea, this purpose, to listen, to help us develop our marvellous potential so we can help others. That's the idea. Sangye chodang soke chognam la changsho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog sangye chodang soke chognam la changsho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog sangye chodang soke chognam la Jangsho Baru Dagni Kyab Suchi Dagi Chonyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Dropa Sho. Okay. So there's so many ways of getting our head around what Buddhism is. What is it? What's the point of it? What is it? So first of all, the typical, first of all, it's clear, isn't it, that it's a body of knowledge. You could say it that way. Well, so is mathematics. Try and think of it this way. Mathematics is a body of knowledge. Music is a body of knowledge. Cooking. And then we have things that we call philosophies, which are sort of ways of describing life. So Buddhism is for sure that. Well, so is Catholicism. So does Judaism. So is, whatever, all the different, around the world, all these different ways over the centuries of human beings, all the marvellous thinkers investigating the meaning of things and presenting their findings about how they think the world is and the purpose of life. We understand this. Well, Buddhism is one of those, So I think one lot of those philosophies, we call it religion. And then that's the type of philosophy that we would say is something you can't prove because it talks about a creator who is the superior person who creates the universe and runs the show. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not saying that shouldn't have that view, but that is an approach. So we obviously tend to fit Buddhism into that because it looks like religion. The trappings, are the same. I'm a nun. I sang a prayer. We do prostrations or holy images. So that's the view we have about a religious philosophy, if you like. So you could argue Buddhism is that for sure, but there's a crucial difference, and I said this yesterday, and it's not just a fine point, it's actually a massive point. And at this point underpins the entire way you would listen to and therefore use Buddhism. And that is that Buddha is not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. There's no concept of creation in Buddhism. Therefore, you could argue there is no concept of punishment and reward, because that seems to fit with the concept of a superior being, and that's not wrong. I'm not discussing. I'm not saying. I'm just stating that. So, when I was a Catholic, God was my creator. God is the boss. God created the universe. God created the laws, the rules. So naturally, God is to be obeyed. So by definition, a sin, as I always quote, and this is a massive point for my mind, to help us understand how to approach these philosophical views that we decide to choose in our life, because we choose them. But necessarily a sin, my Jesuit priest friend said, is going against the will of God, doing what God said not to do. That's what defines it as a sin, he said. Hear that point. He said, let's say God says, Jesus says, don't kill. So then you say, why not? It's a good question. You should ask why not. It's an instruction. So you should know how to take that instruction or that advice. And he says, because God said not to kill. He said there's some aspect of natural law that people don't like getting killed. That's natural law. But he said the main purpose, the main point of it, the thing that determines that it's a negative action, is because God is the boss. So that's for me an intensely powerful view, and I have any respect for people who have that view. Nothing wrong, but it's not the Buddha's view, is all I'm saying. But the trouble is we hear it identically. And it's not just a fine point; it's an absolutely massive point. So I remember one time in New Zealand, I've noticed in the world we all ask the same questions. I promise you, every one of us, Germans, Italians, French, males, females, black, pink, white, you name it. Human beings all ask the same questions. It's very fascinating. I can promise you. But there's only one question I've ever had once from one person. It was a scientist in Nelson, New Zealand. And he said, who revealed the teachings to the Buddha? Which, if you take it as a religion, is a completely valid, correct question. And he got very shocked when I said, nobody. I said, it's come from his own experience. I said, would you ask who revealed the teachings to Einstein? Of course he wouldn't, because we know Einstein's this fellow who used his intelligence and observed the universe and came up with his own findings, did he not, about how things are, and then he presents them. Would you say that's what science is? That is the Buddha. Absolutely no different. Identical. Not a millimetre of difference. And that's a fact. But we have assumptions about what can be proved and not proved. We have an assumption about what science is. And we have an assumption about what religion is. And our assumptions are mistaken. If you think of it, whatever. Is it physics? Mr. Einstein's, it's called physics, isn't it? Okay. Physics is a body of knowledge. Do we agree? And what's a body of knowledge? A bunch of thoughts in a head, isn't it? A bunch of conceptual thoughts that somebody articulates. Would you agree with that? Well, so is mathematics a body of knowledge. Would you agree? So is music. Mr. Bach, you think about Mr. Bach. Look at the mind full of these amazing thoughts. This mind crowded with a million highly sophisticated conceptual thoughts. That's what music is, surely. And then because it's in his mind, his fingers do the job. His fingers couldn't do that job if he didn't have a body of knowledge in his head, could he? So it all comes from the mind. It's all in the mind. This is clear. So Buddhism is a bunch of thoughts about how things exist. Physics is a bunch of thoughts about how things exist. Numbers is a bunch of thoughts about how things exist. Now, music is a bunch of thoughts about how to create lovely sounds. That's a different thing, but it's still a body of knowledge. Think of it that way. Then in that sense, they've all got equal status as being a body of knowledge coming from a human mind. So, philosophy, as we call it, is describing how things are, is it not? So I find it very fascinating. Maybe I've got it wrong if you tell me. I haven't studied all the Greeks and things. But, the Socratic approach is the one that we like in our culture, which is that you step back, you have a very calm, intelligent mind, you don't get all personal, and you listen to different views and you think about things. But this is, I find a bit fascinating. There's no end result in that. It's not as if you're going to come to a right philosophy and finally you've found how things exist and now you've got the right philosophy. We don't think that way. We think philosophy is open-ended. And as long as you keep thinking and keeping open-ended, then you're an intelligent person. Well, I find that completely nihilistic. That's like saying you're allowed to think about mathematics. There are 47 different views of mathematics, but you don't dare come to a conclusion. That might be too subjective. Whereas we know when it comes to mathematics, you're coming to a conclusion about how things are. And we accept that. We love that. Well, Buddha's like that. More like that than the other one. He says things exist a certain way. And this is his point. One way of framing the whole of Buddhism is that things exist a certain way. Beings and all of phenomena exist a certain way. And what he is saying is, and because he's not a creator, he is not asking us to believe him. Like Einstein. If I were Einstein and I said, you better believe what I'm telling you, and I'll punish you if you don't, you'd be out. You'd throw me out the door in one flat second. It's the same here with the Buddha. So what he's saying is this: the extent to which we have views in our mind, and everything in our mind is a viewpoint, he would say, whether it's called an emotion or a thought that 1 + 1 is 2. It's all thoughts. They come down to thoughts. And this is the essence in Buddhist psychology. And we can spend the rest of the day just on that one topic. That he's saying there's this massive disconnect in our minds between how things are and how we perceive things. There's this disconnect between how things are in reality and how we see things. There's a disconnect. And that is the source of all suffering. So the job of being a Buddhist, one way of framing it, is to bring our minds into sync with how things are. That is what liberation is, he says. So he's not asking us to believe it. Don't hear it as fundamentalist. And that's our trouble with religion or philosophy. It sounds like you're being fundamentalist if you dare to say this is how things are. We don't mind saying it in science. No one causes you to be a fundamentalist if you say 1 + 1 is 2. People are happy you tell them the truth. So Buddha's telling you his view. And where did this view come from? Not revelation. He did not have a dream about it. It is not coming from a vision. It's coming from his own hard work in his own mind. He came to these direct observations about how things are. So therefore, by definition, everything that is called Buddhism, if it's valid, and there's a load of junk out there labelled Buddhism, you better be careful. And because it's religion, we think we can do that. You do a meditation course, you get a nice feeling in a meditation, you write a book about it. It's disgraceful. You can look at the credentials you have to show, even to publish a cookbook. Look how many times you have to make a cake to prove it's correct before you dare give a recipe. You'll get sued otherwise. But we think we're allowed to do what we like when it comes to spiritual. It's so irresponsible. Are you hearing me? We're so unbelievably arrogant and lazy intellectually. So Buddhism, every word that is Buddhism, if it's valid, is describing his and anybody since then who's done the same job as him, like Einstein said about E = mc². Everybody else who's proven it, they've become their own Einstein, basically. So everybody who's done Buddha's job and followed his methodology, which is what he followed to become what he said is a Buddha, to rid the mind of all the rubbish and grow all the goodness, to bring the mind into sync with reality, which happens to bring bliss and happiness and compassion and love. They're all linked. It's all there. The methodology's there. Over to you, baby. Here's what I did. This is what you're going to achieve. It's up to you now. Go one step at a time. Here's my map. You follow. And each step of the way, this is the point. Like your good point yesterday. What's your name? Wolfgang. So Wolfgang, his question was really good. He said, how do you know what's true? This is the point. How do we know? Because we'd rather believe. I remember one time at one of the centres somewhere, I forget, and one of the students who'd been studying all the different philosophical views in Buddhism about emptiness. There are many views, very many debates over the centuries, very, very marvellous debates, which seem initially completely abstract to us because it's not a body of knowledge we're familiar with. And the guy said, well, he's a Buddhist, he's been studying for years. He said, oh, whom am I supposed to believe? That's how we think, because we're lazy, bone lazy. And we assume this knowledge is out there mysterious and someone has to tell us what's right. Then we believe it. That's just total laziness. And that's how we tend to be. So you can't prove anything overnight. Not possible. You can't prove that even 1 + 1 is 2 overnight. Someone tells you 1 + 1 is 2, you've got to go then prove it for yourself. Well, you can't prove relativity the first day, because we can't even add up 1 + 1 is 2 yet. So you've got to start at the beginning. And you go each step of the way. And you don't wait, as Wolfgang's point, what if I wait for 80 years in practice and then discover it's the wrong thing? You don't wait 80 years to prove relativity. You've got to start proving 1 + 1 is 2 first, because that relativity is based on 1 + 1 is 2. Are you seeing my point, Wolfgang?
Yes, I see.
So you've got to prove that first. And that gives you courage. Oh, well, Einstein told me that 1 + 1 is 2, and here it is, I just proved it. So far, so good. Then you go to the next step and you prove that one. And you go each step of the way, and you're proving it right each step. And when you finally get to the point with Einstein that you go further than relativity, then, well, you don't throw it out. You keep moving, honey. You can be on a completely wrong map, but, you know, if you're proving the map that says from here to San Francisco, and you've got a map, you don't just have a long line with no streets in between. and then wait 80 miles and hope you get there. You look at the map, oh, they said there was Smith Street, there it is, pretty good, and you get confidence. Are you seeing my point, Wolfgang? It's incremental. It's not absolute. You wait till you see the truth. Do you see? It's gradual. Every body of knowledge is like that. Music, math, cooking, everything. Buddhism the same. Then you can relax and enjoy. And you're the boss. You're verifying each step. You're verifying the truth of it and experiencing it for yourself. That's why to believe only in something is bizarre. It's like you believe that 1 + 1 is 2. Everybody around you knows it, let's say. So you can be buoyant with confidence because they all tell you 1 + 1 is 2. Do you understand? But what if then your mother tells you to go buy 3 oranges, but you can't because you don't know that what it is. You don't know how to count. So you're lost then. It's okay to believe in it as long as it sort of works. But if you have to prove it and do it yourself, you're lost. Then the confidence goes and you crash into despair. Do you see?
I recognized yesterday that also our Lord Buddha was on the wrong way.
He wasn't on the wrong way. He went, no. He went all that way so far and they were amazing. And then he went further, not like backtrack. He went further. It wasn't wrong. He went further. He proved all those points up to there. He agreed with them. And then he went further. Can you hear? Otherwise, it's just fundamentalism and set in stone, you know. You with me? So we've got to relax and enjoy the process, 1 step at a time. You're the boss, Wolfgang. Nobody else. It can't be. That's the Buddha's view. Anyway, are we communicating here?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. So let's see what Buddha says and relax and enjoy it. You know, don't get nervous. We get very nervous when we hear things we don't like. Or panic stations, have a panic attack. Oh, you can't say that. That's terrible. How can you say that? Well, we're big girls and boys. We can hear anything, okay? Grow up. It's all right. Do you understand? We're big girls and boys. So let's open our mind to hear what Buddha says, what is in the Buddha's teachings, which comes from these Hindus as well. They observed all this stuff, except there are various interpretations of it, and that's the point, Wolfgang, too, you know. So, okay, let's go on. Let's talk then. Okay, so Buddha disagrees with the view that there's an ultimate source. So the Hindus have got the view of karma and reincarnation. They've got that view, but they've also still come to the view that's similar as a philosophical position about a creator, a source. That's the ultimate, that's the absolute, that is the source of things. Buddha does not have that view. Okay. So Buddha says, basically, his way of putting it is this. His view. So the materialist view is that mummy and daddy created you. Now, I know I sound very peculiar when I say this, but I think it's the most fascist view I've ever heard. Please hear me. I'm sorry, I know I must sound shocking. You'd probably lock me up or something, you know. Because it's a bit like Frankenstein making that monster. You can't blame the monster, can you? It's just not fair. The Frankenstein created the monster. But that's what we do. Mummy and daddy, these two neurotic, depressed, deluded, psychotic people, decide they're going to make another mini them. Do you understand? That's our view. And excuse me, I'm going to say this, and we believe it. Excuse me, people. Don't misunderstand me. So then they turn me out. Out I come. This little person. You know, a variation of them. So if Hitler's little Austrian housewife mummy did in fact create Hitler, she needs to be accountable. I'm sorry. Don't please, but is this not logical what I'm saying? If you create a gun, then you have to be accountable for the damage it does. It's sort of logical. So if she really did create Hitler, then she plays a role in what he does. There's no question. That for me is absolute logic. If it's wrong, please argue with me. Now, this sounds a bit horrible. If you say God created you, then we dare not say God is the blame. Nobody, except apparently Italians and Argentinians, blame God. Lama Yeshe one time in our centre in Italy, he was in the ward in the hospital visiting, it was about 81 or something, visiting his friend, Geshe Jamba Gyatso, who was one of his student, I think, and who was running the master's program, this amazing 7-year philosophical program that's in our centre in Italy, has been there for 30 years now. Lama Yeshe's first was the vision of it, and now they're teaching it. So Geshe Jamba Gyatso was in the hospital. And Lama went to visit in the ward. And all the Italian boys were translating all the things that the Italian men and the other beds were saying about God. And they're the rudest, most disgraceful things they say about God. God is a pig. Apparently Our Lady's a whore. Do you understand? They're just two of them. I mean, I was a Catholic. You never dared say one bad word about God. Anyway, what Buddha's saying is this view we have, this dualistic view of there's a source, there's a creator, and don't hear this in a mistaken way, I beg you, whether it's mummy or creator. And the fact is, philosophically, they're the exact same position. I am the handiwork of someone else. They're the same position. Can you hear that? Your mother is your creator, or a superior being is your creator. There's different views about that, but they're essentially the same position. So naturally our view is, especially with the materialist one, and this is the basis of our science, the basis of our psychology, if I'm the handiwork of someone else, you naturally go back to that source to see where the problems come from, or indeed the good qualities. Why is Robina good at music? Oh, her mother's a musician. Why is Robina good at anger? Oh, her daddy was angry. Or, why is Robina good at music? Because her mother taught her music. Why is Robina angry? Because her father beat her. That's the logic we use, is it not, for why we think we are what we are. So we don't go to our therapist because you're good at music. And you don't even indeed go to your therapist if you're tone deaf to try and find what happened back then that your mother did that makes you tone deaf, and then you sue your mother. We don't do that. We accept tone deaf. That's just the way it is. But when it comes to anger and hurt and jealousy, all the dramas, we are desperate to get off the hook. We are desperate to find someone to blame. That's our philosophical position. It's just the way ego is, Buddha says. So we also, the blame the dualistic view, the blame mode is, why are you angry, Robina? Because my boyfriend's cheating. Why are you happy, Robina? Oh, my boyfriend loves me. So we blame him also for my happiness. But we don't talk like that, do we? We don't say you're blaming your boyfriend for making you happy. But you are, basically. And that's the dualistic view. That's all of Buddhist psychology, and the whole view of karma is based upon this mistaken view that we assume in the bones of our being that somehow we didn't ask to get born, it's not my fault, and I'm the handiwork of someone else's hard work, and it's sort of all not fair. The good luck and the bad luck. We don't mind the good luck. We don't care about that. Give me more, please. We don't care if there's no cause, but we don't like the bad stuff, so we have to find someone to blame, to get off the hook. This is our philosophy. This, for the Buddha, is the philosophy of ego. It's the philosophy of ego. I'm not trying to be intellectual about it. So then what Buddha's view is, no, darlings, as His Holiness says, no, you created yourself, actually. If you want to find anyone to blame, blame yourself. But it's not blame. It's empowerment. When you realise that Buddha's view is your consciousness is not physical, first point, very different from our view. Second, of course it's not the handiwork of your mummy and daddy. That, for the Buddha, is the most weird idea he's ever heard. The weirdest view, that your mother can give you anger and give you goodness at music and give you morality. She can teach you. She can encourage it. She can be a catalyst for the growth of it. But the it is in you. It's yours. And where did it come from? Not from a creator, not from mummy and daddy, but from your past habit of that. So that's why to even take on board, even theoretically, as a philosophical, position, as a body of knowledge, to understand Buddhism properly, you have to factor in this view of the mind being not physical, not being the handiwork of mummy, daddy, or creator. In other words, of not beginning in your mother's womb, but you're being a continuity from before. Buddha, Materialism looks into the past, but mummy and daddy, grandma, grandpa, and back to the monkeys. We accept that. That's our past. That's where we come from. Buddha says, yes, we come from the past, but guess what? Not mummy's and daddy's past, our own past. The concept's not too difficult. It's just that we're not used to it. Buddha says we come fully programmed into this life at the first second of conception. With what? Your own tendencies. It's so simple. The concept is not complicated. So then the trouble is we think it's denying the reality of genes and DNA and chemicals and mummy and daddy and behaviour. No, there's a way of putting it all together. It's just different. It's just a reconfiguring of these things. They all can fit together. We have to think it through, obviously. That's why these marvellous conversations, these last 30 plus years, between all the scientists and the Dalai Lama and his mob, it's wonderful. Bringing these two supposedly opposite views together. It's wonderful. So the experiential implications of the different views we have is the real point to get, You see, because we've got views in our mind, which Buddha's saying are all just viewpoints, but because we're so familiar with them, we don't even think that they are viewpoints. This is the hardest one to see. Once we see this, it's a revelation. That what goes on in our mind for the Buddha, which is all these layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of conceptual stories, conceptual elaborations that we come programmed with from the first second of conception, from having had them before. They're just in our mind as if they're the truth. The deeper the habit, the deeper the assumption that this is just the way things are. So whatever goes on in our mind, Buddha says, informs the way the world appears back to us. So that's what we have to investigate. Because what Buddha's saying is, like I said, there's a disconnect between what's in here and what's out there. In reality, what's out there. That what we see out there is dependent on what's in here. We understand this. As our mother would tell us, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This is truly profound, is what Buddha's saying. But we just hear it as a little kind of cliche, Everything is in the eye of the beholder. So the job of being a Buddhist then, the Buddha would say, is to remove from our mind the misconceptions. And we have to look at what he means by that. And even that, like I said to Wolfgang yesterday, what is knowledge, or what is true or whatever, is a conceptual thing. It's not an absolute. It's a contextual thing. So here then, one approach to Buddhism is the body of, it's ethics. Absolutely. Another one is a body of how to get wisdom, which is what we're saying here. Another one is it's a view of how to get happy and how not suffer. It all comes to the same thing for the Buddha. All of these subsume to the thing, to the job of being a Buddhist is doing all of these things. So by practicing morality, by not harming others, by developing our good qualities and lessening our negative qualities, two results come. One, our own happiness and bliss. Two, wisdom comes. And three things, and then empathy and compassion. These all come together. They all come to the same thing. Whichever doorway you enter into Buddhism, they come to the same thing. But we have to comprehend this, and this takes time, obviously, putting all the pieces together, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. Initially, Buddhism looks like a bit of just a bunch of disparate bits and pieces flying all over the place. But if it is a valid system, it has to be coherent intellectually. That's a fact. If gardening, if botany is a valid system, it has to be coherent first intellectually. If acupuncture is a valid system, not a weird bunch of wicky-wacky, put your needle here and there and something magical happens. If it's a valid system, it has to be coherent intellectually. If mathematics is valid, it has to be coherent intellectually. We don't think of religion like that, but that's an absolute certainty for the Buddha. If it is a valid system, it has to be coherent first intellectually. It's up to us to work it out, if we choose. No one's forcing us to be a Buddhist. So his view about karma then, and the mind is not physical, mind doesn't come from mummy daddy, mind doesn't come from a creator, mind is also used synonymously with the word consciousness, usually. Mind goes to far more subtle levels of cognition. Its job is to cognize. Cognize what, Buddha? That which exists, baby. consciousness. It goes to far more subtle levels of cognition, such subtle levels of cognition that if you were to see a person who'd accomplished that level of cognition, by practicing this amazing intellectual, psychological skill, this genius Indians more than 3,000 years ago cultivated, called single-pointed concentration. If you were to see a person who is in that state of mind, has gone beyond the grosser level and the grosser level of conceptual and sensory and has accessed this microscope of their own mind, if you saw them, they would look like they are dead, because the grosser level is not involved. But we don't posit that in our culture, therefore we think it's superstitious or religion, you know. But this technique's there for, Buddha would say, in countless past lives, we've had single-pointed concentration countless times. It's easy peasy. You can get in a few years. Nothing special. Communists could do it. You don't have to be religious. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's a technical skill. Okay, it demands morality and ethics and control and discipline, but basically it's not religious. It's not holy. It's not believing in anything. Please hear me. That's there for anyone who wants to try it. Hard work, though, you know. You've got to give up sex, drugs, rock and roll, and husbands and mortgages and everything, because you can't do it otherwise. You've got intense technique, go beyond the usual drama to access this subtle level of our mind. These Indians discovered this, if you like. It's unbelievable. If you were to read some of the qualities of a person who's accomplished this, it's utterly amazing. I've just finished editing, or just about to finish editing, a book of Lama Yeshe's on Mahamudra meditation. It's so delicious. You'll discover clearly what Mahamudra meditation is. It's so delicious, I tell you. Wisdom will put it out next year. And there's a whole chapter in there, just Lama sort of casually talking about some of the benefits of having accomplished this single-pointed concentration. It's beyond what we would think. We think it's mystical, but it's practical. It's there, accessible to anybody. That's low-level realization. That's the starting point for the Buddha. Then you start to get some insight and get some realizations and cut the rubbish out of the mind. So this subtle level of cognition is not posited in our culture. Very simple. Because it doesn't depend upon the brain. It's beyond conceptual. It's beyond sensory. So this model of the mind, come up with, observed in here by these amazing Indians. They map the mind internally. This is mind-blowing. We have no concept like that in our psychology. We have to map a brain. They map it internally. So the model of the mind that's studied, the model is so sophisticated, so fascinating, that's studied today in the Tibetan monastic system. Anything I'm saying in this room is coming from that body of knowledge, which is Buddhism, coming from these Indians, thousands of years old. Scientists would be blissed out, I would say, to study that model. But they've got to posit the possibility that you're not talking about the brain here. And that's the obstacle for people, you know. And how so rude we are dismissing these amazing thinkers from centuries ago, you know. It's so insulting, so arrogant. So anyway, this very subtle consciousness, this mind of ours, goes to subtle levels that don't depend upon brain, that don't depend upon the grosser level. And that there's this level of mind naturally has infinite more power to cognize phenomena the gross level can't. That means the past, the future, the minds of others. This is not some hippy-trippy thing. This is a natural part of the potential of the mind based upon the findings of these amazing Indians and then the Buddha. And he took these techniques with him and kept going and had his own variations on them. Many debates, even among Buddhism, many debates about these things. That's okay. So your mind's not physical. Goes to more subtle levels. Is not the handiwork of a creator or your mother or your father. And did not begin in your mother's womb. Because why? Because everything in the universe, as far as Buddha is concerned, normally speaking, the world as we know it, is the product of the law of cause and effect. It's a highly dynamic process, that whatever exists this second is the fruit of things before it. This is logical. You think of anything in the universe at this second that's existing now, we know it didn't pop up out of the sky, out of nowhere. It has causes. It comes from a previous moment of that, which came from a previous moment of that, which came from a previous moment of that, which came from a previous moment of that. Now, interestingly, we are all desperate to find the first moment. This is one of the commonest questions and assumptions we all have. We say, but there must be. The commonest question we all ask is, well, where did it begin? Where did karma begin? Where did suffering begin? Where did I begin? Where did it begin? Buddha says, what a silly question. It's the wrong question. But the fact that we have the question, we so believe there has to be. We can't even hear that there can't be a beginning. Why? Just logically, how can there be? If we posit the dynamic process of cause and effect, that by definition this is the effect of what? A previous cause. And that is the effect of a previous cause. And that is the effect of a previous cause. We know this. So if we had this cup, we kept tracking back. We know we'd go back in an unbroken chain of things, back and back and back to the first moment of the universe. And then as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, Big Bang, no problem, just not the first Big Bang, that's all. So that has to come from a previous moment, necessarily. So you keep following that back, you're going to have beginningless time, beginningless matter, beginningless mind, necessarily. But that's the wackiest idea to our head. This freaks us out. We can't cope with that because we feel safe if there's a beginning. So not being rude here, but the concept of a creator is the answer to that's the beginning. But if you're a naughty kid at school, you know very well, miss, who created God? Be quiet. It's a very valid question. But by definition, and that's a philosophical position too, that by definition a creator is a source that does not have a cause, because that's inferior. It's an absolute reified thing that is that, has always been that. And so that's where Buddha's discussion is, about the very way what's called a creator or a soul exists. Not so much that there isn't that thing, it's how it exists. That's where Buddha's discussions are, It's how things exist. This is the stuff that so-called philosophy, but why do we think some person in the university sitting in their ivory tower is only allowed to think about this stuff? It's our job. It's our job. If we want to get liberated, honey, you've got to do this thinking, Buddha says. Someone can't liberate you. You've got to liberate yourself. Someone can count for you, but finally you've got to learn to count yourself. Then you're in charge. Then you run the show. So, okay, our consciousness, not physical, goes to more subtle levels, is a continuity of mental moments that goes back and back and back, and will continue on and on after this body goes, is not the handiwork of someone else. This is a fundamental point. So the other point, finally, the point of all of this, is the potential of the mind. The potential is the point. Buddha has found from his own experience that mind, by definition, is potentially a Buddha. Sangye, the Tibetan for Buddha. The etymology is so tasty. Sang implies the utter eradication of all neurosis, all misconceptions, all delusions, all ego, which means all fears, which means all suffering, because they're the cause of suffering. First one, that's what Buddha's found. Secondly, Gye, the Mahayana view, the development to perfection of the other stuff in our mind, which is valid, relatively speaking. Compassion, love, wisdom, joy, these can be developed to perfection. The other stuff are adventitious, Buddha says. They do not belong. They're not at the core of our being. They aren't necessary. They're like extra bells and whistles. You don't need them, and we can get rid of them. This is Buddha's outrageous, radical, shocking point, psychologically speaking. That's the point of being a Buddhist. Of all of this, the point is that. Get rid of all the misconceptions in the mind that are the source of suffering. Why? Because they're not in sync with reality. And he didn't make up reality. He's not a boss. He's not a creator. He's observed it. So it's there to be observed by everybody. Reality is right there staring us in the face now in the microphone. It's not something you impose on something. You don't impose emptiness onto things. You don't impose dependent arising. The things are dependent arising. Things are empty of inherent existence. That's reality for the Buddha. That's how he states reality. It's not how things... No one made it this way. It's not a question of believing it. It's not something somebody made up. It's how things are. And when our mind is in sync with reality, we have seen that we see reality, we are in sync with reality. That's the source of all the suffering going and all the joy and bliss and compassion, which is our natural state. It's a way of saying what Buddha says. So there's a reason to think about karma, not just to believe it because he says so, because he says that's how things are. He says karma, cause and effect, continuity of consciousness, blah, blah. He says it's how things are. He's not asking us to believe it, though. Not trying to shove it down your throat and digest it, or indigestibly just swallow it. Not like that, which is how we think of religion. Because you can't prove it, so you've got no choice but to believe it. This is completely insane for Buddha. So karma means action, apparently. I don't speak Sanskrit. But it implies this kind of, you can say action-reaction, it implies that. It's a shorthand for this law of cause and effect, the law of karma. So this law, what's a law then? What's a law? Well, one law says don't go more than 70 miles an hour. That's what we call a man-made law, isn't it? A natural law is if you do crash at 70 miles an hour, you're in trouble, honey. You agree? That's a natural law, isn't it? So you can have a man-made law, you can have a Buddha-made law. Buddha's, if you live in a house, mummy makes the laws. That's fine. But it's not the real point. That's the point about mummy says also, don't do that. Why not, mummy? Because I say so, baby. We know that. But that's not the real reason she tells me not to go near the fire. We know finally it's because it'll burn me, but she has to protect me. But if I now, when I'm nearly dead, 70-something, think I shouldn't go near the fire, why not? Oh, mummy said, you'd feel very sorry for me. Do you understand? The natural law is that fire will burn you. The mummy-made law is that she says so. That's okay, but that's the Christian view, that's the real law. No, there's no equivalent of God's law in Buddhism, and that's what we tend to think of religion. There's no such thing in Buddhism. He's only talking natural law. It's a very important point. Or what exists in reality. Natural. It is that way. So this law of cause and effect, Buddha frames it, it's all in terms of how to get happy and how to stop suffering. It's the law of cause and effect applies to everything, microphones and cups, The proper laws of cause and effect that refer to this cup, you better obey them, then you'll get a cup. Same with flowers and everything. You learn the law, you'll get the result. Pretty simple. And you replicate that every time if it works. Easy peasy. It's called science. Well, Buddha says the law of karma is the law that he would suggest that karma is the way things are, and that happiness comes from this and suffering comes from that. And given that we don't want suffering and do want happiness, he says, okay, abide by the laws of karma and you'll stop causing suffering and you'll start causing happiness. Pretty good. If you want a flower, you better learn the laws of botany. You want to build a house, you better learn the laws of numbers and things. It's a law. It's how things work, and then you prove it. Of course, karma is more subtle because we're talking about past lives and future lives, which we don't posit. So first, theoretically, you posit it. Nothing wrong with that. So the law of cause and effect is what runs in the minds and lives of sentient beings. It's a natural law. He didn't make it up. He's not invented it. And there's no punishment and there's no reward. When we hear things like this, we hear punishment and reward. There is no punisher and there's no rewarder. That's not Buddha's job. This takes time to hear because it sounds like the same thing. Buddha says, don't kill. If you kill, you get born in the lower realms. Oh, that sounds the same as going to hell, the God says. Yeah, it does, identical. But the difference is massive. Nobody sends you there. You create your own reality. This is hard to hear. So, okay, Buddha would assert there are trillions of sentient beings, mind possessors. The lovely term in Tibetan, I think it's a great word. I wish we'd use it more in English. Mind possessor, sem chen. We say sentient being. It's kind of weird, in my opinion. It's okay, though. So sentient beings, mind possessors, there are trillions. Humans are like 0.00001%, of all sentient beings. Like we're a miniature percentage of all sentient beings. And what's utterly fascinating, if we look at Buddhism properly, he's referring to all sentient beings. Buddhist psychology refers to all sentient beings. This is a big shock to us. We think animals are a different kettle of fish, not to mention others we don't think. Buddha, for they're all the same. They're all, karma plays out in the minds and lives of all mind possessors, and the Buddhist psychology refers to all mind possessors. When you understand the Buddhist model for yourself, you understand a dog's mind, an elephant's mind, an ant's mind, a fish's mind. They're all the same. The law is the same for all. We're all in the same boat. All of us, Buddha says, naturally experiencing the fruits of our own past actions, own past karma. Now, we get this perfectly when it comes to becoming a musician or a cook or a physicist. We know perfectly well, as I mentioned yesterday, why are you good at piano, Mary? Well, Robina, I have practiced for 10 years. What do you expect? You know it's the fruit of your past actions. It's hardly rocket science. And you're honoured to own responsibility for your own hard work for 10 years, which is the main cause of how come you can now play piano. Fantastic. We are honoured to own responsibility. And indeed, if you haven't practiced piano, why are you not good at piano, Mary? Well, you know, I didn't practice so well. You don't say it's the piano's fault, mummy's fault, the teacher's fault, Bach's fault, they didn't write proper music, it's not my fault. We don't say that. We would own the fact that I didn't work hard enough, let's say. But it's like a minefield when it comes to emotional stuff. Why are you good at anger, Robina? Well, that's my mother's fault and my father's, and we mean it sincerely. That's our psychological model. I'm not even saying it sarcastically. We mean it. We sincerely believe I'm angry because my boyfriend cheats. We really believe I'm angry because my genes from my mother and my chemicals and my DNA and the wrong thing and the weather and the food. We believe it. I'm not saying it even sarcastically. Buddha says it's embarrassing to think that. Of course they play a role. He doesn't argue with that. Everything's interdependent. But all he's giving is, he says the mind is the main player. He's putting the emphasis on the mind, our own mind, and our own habits. So when I go to the therapist and I say, we try to find why I keep choosing crummy boyfriends, Where's my boyfriend today? What's your name? Horst. Hurst. How do you spell it? Urs. Oh. Say, Urs is my boyfriend. I'm sorry, Urs. I don't know if you can cope with that. So Urs is my boyfriend. It's natural, when you see me crying. I mean, this seems so natural, it's almost silly to talk about it, Why are you crying, Robina? Urs is looking at the girls again. You understand? So the jealousy rises, the pain arises, the hurt arises, we know these things. And because the feelings are so enormous, they loom large, that it's natural to us, and this is reinforced in our science and reinforced in our psychology. I'm not trying to be Tom Cruise here. Don't misunderstand me in criticising psychiatry. It's looking more philosophically. You understand? In my heart, I believe it feels instinctively true. No one has to teach me that he was mean to me. I know it, and I feel he's the cause. It appears this way. It feels this way. When I was a little girl, let's say, and my sister did something naughty to me, which she did. Janet, my sister. Hello, Janet, if she's there. I don't know if my sisters ever listen to me. I'm embarrassed if they do. Because I hear this goes on the computer, So whatever. But my sister Jan, who was the oldest, there were 7 of us. My mummy was very busy. She had 8 babies in 9 years, 7 girls and a little boy came at the end. Tony. Anyway, whatever. So when Jan was mean, we must have had some jealousy between us. She was mean to me. And I'm cross-eyed. My eye, anyway, I don't want to demonstrate. This is show and tell. If I want to look out this eye, can you see? If I want to look out this eye, I've got to do that. See? Can you see? I've got to do that. Can you see? Can you see my eyes? And now I can't see anything. I'm all out of focus. But as a little girl, I think I had to force my eye in so I could see properly. And so I'm really cross-eyed, as they say. Well, Janet just had to say cockeye. That was the end of me. I'd crumble into a heap of patheticness, And I'd run to Mummy, Janet's mean. She called me cockeye, all my other sisters, I just bully them if they said something, but not Janet, for some reason. The dynamic. She was the oldest, Do you understand? So she'd say cockeye, that was the end of me. So naturally, my mother didn't have to teach me to cry when Janet called me cockeye. Do you understand? I knew how to cry and get angry and hurt. It's spontaneous. So that we know. It's very deep inside us. So what I'm getting at is these feelings and emotions are deep inside us, which implies, if we take the Buddha's view, that these feelings and emotions are underpinned by strongly held stories deep in our bones that we've practiced for many lifetimes, then it's obvious that there's an elaborate story in there that I've programmed that I didn't need to be taught. My mother didn't have to teach me to get hurt and angry when Janet called me cockeye. I knew how to do it. So that's because it's so spontaneous and because it feels as if Janet is the cause of my problem. I believe she is the cause of my problem. And then you think about it. Who created our models of the mind in the last couple of 100 years? It's human beings, aren't they? Freud, Jung, all these famous people. Well, they're people like you and me, right? So they've observed their own feelings. They've observed the instinct of attachment, instinct of jealousy, instinct of anger. So naturally, that's the basis of their identifying what psychology is. So of course, all our models talk like this. And then we have reinforced by the scientific view that your mother made you, that she is you began in your mother's womb and you're made by your mother. So naturally, these views reinforce that mummy and daddy made us. Therefore, they're the blame, the cause. Cause is a polite word for blame. So of course that's the view we have. We all run to it, but no one had to teach us that. It comes naturally. You understand? It's very spontaneous. So of course we believe it because it's spontaneous. We believe it because it's spontaneous. So the point is this. What Buddha's saying is this. Yes, Janet was mean to me. He agrees. Not kind to call your sister cockeyed, even though she is cockeyed. Do you understand? Because she wasn't being kind when she said cockeyed. She was trying to hurt me. That's clear. So that's not good. He would agree that's not kind. He would agree with that. So that's looking at Janet's behaviour. He says, now let's look at you, Robina. Let's see what we can do with you, baby. Forget Janet. She said cockeyed. I agree, it's not cool. Now forget her. Get her out of the way. Now let's look at your mind. Let's look at what that is. What is the name of what you're feeling? What is the thing that's in there? It's called anger, it's called jealousy, it's called attachment, which is based on this and based on that. He's got this whole analysis of the breakdown of what's going on in here. So he says, let's look at that, not that. So this is what's interesting. It's very hard for us. So then my kind therapist would say, tell me about your anger, Robina. Tell me about the feelings. And what I'll do is give you a detailed description of my mean sister. No, you told me about Janet already. I want you to describe your feelings. We don't even know how to, because our feelings are articulating the object. When you describe, if you're happy, and I'm in love with Urs, tell me about your happiness, Robina. All I'll do is describe handsome Urs, won't I? We describe the object, because that's what we're fixated on. Anger, Buddha says anger is a way of interpreting my sister Janet, and that I believe she's the source of it. So of course I'll describe Janet. If I'm happy, he is the source of it. That's how we believe. If you look at if you're happy and you think of a chocolate cake, all you're thinking is the chocolate cake. So we put all the energy on the outside. This is natural, Buddha says. We do this, and that's delusion's job. But he says we've got it wrong. We're looking in the wrong direction. So in the same way that if you go to your therapist, what we're going to do naturally is look into the past. We're looking for a needle in a haystack. That somehow we feel we're going to come to the thing that happened that is the cause of why you've since then developed the habit to be angry, why Robina has developed the habit to be jealous, why she keeps choosing crummy boyfriends who look at the other girls. We're very determined that that's how it is. We think the cause is back there, out there. And that's why we try to uncover the past and look at our memories. And we're looking for the first cause. Are you with me, people? Mm-hmm. We're very determined we'll find it. So Buddha says there's nothing wrong with looking into the past. It's very intelligent. It's good to look at what your mother did and your father did, because that can indicate certain things about your past. But the thing that they're pointing to, which is the point, is what's in here. So the Buddha's point is very simple. Your father did beat you, Robina. Let's say. He didn't really, but let's say he did. My mother did teach me. Your mother did teach you music, sweetheart. You're right. They are. So what he would say is they're merely the catalysts. They're the secondary causes. They're the triggers. And the real cause is the anger in here that you brought with you, Robina. That's yours, precious. And the jealousy is yours, darling. And the being good at music is yours. And your kindness is yours. And your love is yours. And your intelligence is yours. They're yours, sweetheart. They're not coming from mummy and daddy. They're just merely triggered. My being good at music was there since I got born from having practiced it before. And then my mother's teaching me triggered it. That we understand. That's Buddha's view. So then he gets us to look into the mind itself, the anger itself, the jealousy itself. And that's tricky because we don't know how to do that. It feels puzzling to us. And what he's saying is that stuff was in the mind from having done it before. How come you're good at music today? Because you've done it before. How come you look on YouTube and there's a 3-year-old little girl playing Bach, which blows our mind when we see these things, you know? Well, she came programmed with that. It's not complicated. How come Hitler? He came programmed. That mother, she's sitting there having sex with Austrian wife with the husband, the father of Hitler, and this little kid comes along. They're just sitting there having sex, He comes barging in coming with his own stuff. Zero to do with her. It's not a difficult concept, intellectually. It's just it's so different from the views we hold as the truth now. It's you've got to squeeze your brain a little bit, as Lama Yeshe puts it, to think it through, if you choose to. And it's only a hypothesis here. We're not saying it's true yet. Don't say it's true. Don't shove it down your throat. I've got to believe in reincarnation to be a Buddhist. Don't believe in anything, please. We're big girls and boys. Like I said, we can posit anything. But we want to be prepared to want to. And then your job is to start to process it. And first intellectually prove it to be true, coherent, and then eventually experientially. You'll prove it to be true. If it's true. It's up to you. I'm prepared for Buddha to be wrong. I'm in no hurry. I'm enjoying my relationship with him. Do you understand? Yes. One step at a time, please. Relax, So now some questions.
There's a question from online, from Leanne Brown. She asks...
Leanne Brown.
Yes.
Hi, Leanne.
She asked, how do you live with your thoughts? And then asked, I understand, but how do I deal with negative people?
Oh, darling, we're going to unfold all this. Can you wait, Leanne? We're going to go into all this. It's all part of the process, sweetheart. We're getting to the basics first. We're looking at the fundamentals first, and this is the building blocks for the answer to all these questions, which is what is daily life, isn't it? Yeah. We'll get there, Leanne. Who else? That's enough? Anybody else? Yes.
Are there a limited or unlimited number of sentient?
Are there a limited or unlimited number of sentient beings? It's a good point, isn't it? So let's think about it. Okay, let's think about it. If all consciousnesses that do exist at this moment, and the Buddha would say there's not an atom of space you won't find consciousnesses, so in that sense you could say there's a limitless number, but there can never be more or less of them because they're beginningless and endless. So there's both a limited number and an unlimited in the sense that they're uncountable, in the sense that there's so many. But they can't be new ones and they can't be ones disappearing if they're beginningless and endless. If we take the law of cause and effect, okay, the law of cause and effect would say that this consciousness that is existing in this moment, my consciousness, came from a previous moment of this river of mental moments, isn't it? And that came from the previous moment of this river of mental moments. And we get back to the first second of conception and we track it back to the previous moment of that river of mental moments, and we will not find a first. We can't, even though it's this wacky idea to us. Second, in Buddhism too, there are different views about what happens to the mind when it's become liberated, when the mind is rid of all the rubbish. The Hinayana teachings, the Theravada teachings, interpretation of Buddha's teachings would say that when you become liberated in that particular life and then you die, your mind will disappear, gone like a puff of smoke. The Mahayana view says, or as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, we Mahayanas have a problem with that. He says that they say necessarily mind is also endless. So there's different views there. Wolfgang, I can't hardly see you. It's okay though, never mind. Okay, so any more questions? Yes.
The karma seems like reward and punishment because...
Yeah, that's right.
The good actions
bring good results. That's right, yes.
The bad actions...
Yes,
bad results.
that's right.
It's just...
Exactly.
It's just fortuitous that it...
No, not gratuitous at all. Would you accept that if you eat good food, it should bring good health?
Yes.
Was that punishment and reward? It's just natural laws, and we don't get all drama queens about that, do we? But as soon as it comes to morality, we get all caught up and excited. Are you with me?
I am.
The Buddha says it's a natural law that good, and we're going to go into this, we're going to try and describe it, we'll unpack it, okay? It's a natural law that your mind, when it is spacious and generous and loving and kind and respectful, forget the result it does to others. That is you producing a wiser, kinder, more generous, more loving person every single day. So you are producing a good, kind, loving person, which is what's labelled happiness. So it's a natural thing. Like practicing piano produces a musician. So the biggest part that's more esoteric for us is that when your consciousness passes away, how that can then cause you to take a particular life and have future experiences. That's where it's more abstract, of course. But the principle is that. So there's no one involved in, there's no punisher and rewarder. That's the key point about punishment and reward. There has to be a person who calls the shots. Are you with me? Yeah. So it takes time to think about it. My mother, my Catholic mother used to say, virtue has its own rewards. It's a powerful statement. That's Buddha's point about karma, which is a massive one from the very beginning, because we have this instinctive, ego has an instinctive feeling of punishment and reward. No one has to teach us that. Don't blame your Catholic mother or your Jewish mother. Buddha says that's a function of ego, to be dualistic. To want to be a good boy, naturally, you want to be praised by others and you don't want to be blamed. So that defines much of the way we act in daily life. That's why when mummy doesn't see you be naughty, you think, oh, good, I got away with it. Because our view already is one of punishment and reward, and we want to avoid the punishment and we want to get the reward. It's ego that does that. No one tells us this, and then we express it as a philosophy. Are you with me? Any questions? Where? Yes, Wolfgang.
How should we address you, please?
Who?
You.
Oh, as you wish. Sweetheart, you're so kind. You have to ask other people that. I mean, I'm Robina, you do what you like. You talk to somebody else about that, but I'm Robina, okay? My name is Robina. No, you do what you like. It's not my business what you call me. I can't say. It's very rude to say. I want you to call me something. But my name is Robina, and if you want to ask how people do those things, you have to talk to other people. I'm Robina, okay, Wolfgang? You're very sweet.
Do you know anybody who is alive and can reach single point concentration?
Oh, darling, there must be countless people. Yes, that's easy. There are people, me personally, well, only if they tell you, because you can't see it yourself if you haven't achieved it. It's not something that's hidden. It's not something that's evident. And people would tend not to talk about their experiences. They're very, very humble. So the Dalai Lama is said to be, okay, I'll give you an example. The Dalai Lama is said to be an actual Buddha, which means his consciousness pervades the universe. He sees all things as they exist, and he has infinite compassion for all beings. Well, let's just say, now I can't tell unless you've got that level of realization. You can't tell, can you? And so the biggest practice in among the Buddhists is that you're humble. You don't announce your realizations. That would be the worst thing. So then the Dalai Lama one time, all the Tibetans are always saying, oh, I don't know anything, which is humility. But we don't like that in our culture. So it backfired on him one time in Bloomington, in Indiana somewhere, and one student cried and said, well, if you don't know anything, what hope have we got? Which, you understand, which is a really interesting point. So he kind of backtracked a bit and said he knew a few things. But one thing he did do, which is, you take this or leave it, he then said, he did say that when he was in India in 1956, was to celebrate the 2500th anniversary of the Buddha's enlightenment or something, he said, first time in India, in 56, he had a memory, he said, of being in the back of the crowd of a teaching of the Buddha. So you can take that or leave it. All right? I'm just telling you. So it's not easy to know what someone else knows unless they tell you. In other words, if you know let's say you're an expert in Kung Fu, then you'd recognize other Kung Fu people, wouldn't you? And you'd know according to your level where they're at, wouldn't you? But if you don't know Kung Fu, you'd never recognize it, would you? So you've got to have it yourself to even recognize it in others. So unless they tell you, you're not going to know. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, so it's not easy. And you don't put your credentials up, I now have single point of concentration and I have a clairvoyance with a letter after it. Come and see me. Some people do, but you would never do that as a Buddhist. You would never confess to it, ever. You wouldn't. So it's an interesting point. Okay, people, what else? Where? Yes.
When they say that on merit...
What, darling, what? What?
On the merit multiplying days, they say karma multiplies by 100.
Yeah, no, let's go to that eventually.
I can't fathom how cause and effect plays.
No, I know. Let's go there later. When we talk about that later, when we go into karma more detail. Let's keep it on the earth first. Okay? Shall we just keep it practical? Okay. So, darling, what time is lunch? Or tea, in fact. What? 12 is lunch.
Yes. And there are a few more questions from onliners.
Okay, I believe you. So, okay. So we've only got 12 to 12, and then we've got 2 to 4. We've got very little time to talk about karma. I promised myself I'd talk slower today, but I don't know if I am, because we've got lots to talk about. So just give me the essence of the questions.
A
people.
lot of them just have to do with how do you deal with challenges.
Well, darlings, it'll all come, I promise you. All of this is the groundwork. I'm trying to give the groundwork. And then we're going to go into how to apply this in daily life, okay? So this morning will be a little bit like groundwork. And then in the afternoon, maybe let's go more into how you apply this stuff, because that's the point of all this. So if we can wait, because that's always our urgent questions, It's how to apply this. But it's sort of here we're discussing the recipes, and now in the afternoon it'll be how to apply it. But you've got to have the recipes first. So if you can be a bit patient, people, and come. Well, not be patient if you like, you can not mind. That's up to you. So let's have a 15-minute break. Quick break, okay? I'll just sit here and read my iPad. Read the Australian football news. The Sydney Swans won on Friday night, so I'm very happy. Go on, have a 15-minute break. 15 minutes. Come back at 25 past. Okay? Thank you, darlings.